Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ed3 podcast. So excited to have a special guest today. This swashbuckling, generative AI building, Spain living, AI storytelling, hardcore dadding, product designing Swedish Viking is a leading creator in the generative AI space. He designs using Midjourney, now Adobe, and he's explored everything from bubble furniture to Eurovision to fashion shoots of men with flamingos. And he shares these amazing designs on Twitter where he inspires thousands to not only see his cool designs, but also make their own. He's the founder of bedtimestory.ai, the author of Inside My Head AI, the newsletter, and he's a leading thinker into how to put designers at the heart of the AI creative workflow. So please welcome the Jack Sparrow of AI art, Mr. Linus Ekenstam.
Wow, what an introduction.
That is you, man. You're doing all those things. I'm so excited to chat a little bit. We are going to do a webinar in a week on June 20th and later on a course. And so we've had a chance to work together, but I'm really curious now that you've met me a little bit. Do I actually need to learn how to design? Can I just use AI for all this stuff and not waste your time to go learn those basics I skipped?
Well, I think definitely it's a good thing to learn design for sure. I mean, designers are at the heart and center of all of this. I'd say that AI is basically a tool, and it's a powerful tool, like way more powerful than any of the previous tools that designers might have had at their disposal. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, you mentioned that AI is a tool for designers. So tell us a little bit about what are the most powerful things you found that AI can do for a creative?
Wow. Yeah. Well, there's so many things. One thing is like we're very early in the age of intelligence, or like the age of generative AI. I guess if we compare it, we're kind of at like the Tetris of game. If we would compare it to gaming, we're like at where Tetris would have been when it got out. So you can do a lot of things, but like obviously there's a limit as well. But I think like if you look at a designer mindset, like in your workflow, there are plenty of spaces where currently you're doing a lot of repetitive work. And all those areas where you're doing manual labor and repetitive work are probably prone to kind of like, I could infuse this part with AI. Could be anything from like mood board early on in your workflow or in your process to kind of in the end where you're trying to get more artwork out or more final arts, and basically you don't have the time to render everything, or you don't have the budget to do that. You might end up like, well, we can actually take some of these things that we already created and just create more using AI. You just take this as input and then just do more. So I don't think there's like, there's no limit to how creative you can be and like where you can infuse things. But I think there might be like some limits to the capabilities of the models at this point, depending on how, what your kind of like prerequisites are, or like how your project is kind of laid out. But it's hard for me to kind of go and say like prescriptive, say like, hey, these are the 20 things you can do, but I could like point at parts of the, an average process, and this is where it could do AI stuff.
I think a lot of people are unfamiliar with the fact that they can use their own artwork or their own designs with this. So if I'm a designer and I have, maybe I've made something, or I took a photo, or, I have a sketch or whatever it might be, walk me through what that might look like using AI.
Yeah.
How it might be slightly different than a normal process.
So there could be a few things. Like imagine the standard use case is that you're kind of using text to generate things. It could be that you're using ChatGPT to generate text, for example. So text in, text out. Or you might be using Midjourney or Stable Diffusion. And these are two different products that are used to create art or create photos or images. Like, well, let's call it just images, like, because it could be anything. And usually how they work is like you write something and you get something out. So text in and some visual out. But most of these tools also support image in, image out. So you can upload an image or multiple images, and the AI can like look at those and fuse those and produce something randomly out of that. Or you can use image plus text. So you can like upload your own image, add some text, and then kind of prompt against that image that you uploaded or the images that you uploaded. And in that case, you'll create more stuff, but based on your own material. Like interesting use cases here could be that maybe you have some reference images that you've made. Maybe you have like some, let's say like pattern or visual. And then, maybe you're doing a couch, or you're doing an interior, or you're doing a piece of clothing, or you're doing a website. Then you can use that plus whatever else. And then you can write like, I want a sofa with this material, for example. And you could the AI will spit out things, and maybe in the first try you don't get something that you like. But the good thing with AI here is that you can just try again and again and again. Every time you try something, you're basically rolling a dice. So it's like, yeah, this is something that's also important when you're kind of using these tools. It's like, it's not always going to be right at the first try, because that's not how these tools work. The same input can give vastly different outputs just because the way that these things are structured and how they work.
I know a lot of people have concerns about sort of ownership, and I know you've talked to me a little bit about that offline. So walk me through a little bit how you think about that, both using images, but also then if I create something on one of these tools.
Yes, again, it differs a little bit where jurisdiction wise where you are. Let's say in the US, there's one kind of rule, and then in Europe, there's a different. But I think rule of thumb is like, if you're generating something using Midjourney, for example, completely AI generated, you are not going to be able to copyright it, but there's nothing against using it for commercial use. So the only thing is that you cannot say, hey, this is 100% mine, and you cannot use it. It's like, you cannot copyright the work, basically. But if you are creating stuff with AI and you're manipulating that in post-process, pulling it into a third-party tool like Photoshop, or you're doing something else with it, or you're generating multiple things and then stitching things together on yourself, all the work that you've done that involves you manipulating the image, that stuff can be copyrighted. So legislation is not really fast here. I'd say like, only if you're working with really big clients that, they might have very specific needs or very specific rules in their requests, then this is a problem. But if you're working with an average, mom and pop shop or a small, medium-sized company, they will never have issues with this. Or if they are, then you should talk about it, and you should be like, well, either we can do this way and we can save a lot of money and a lot of time, or we can go do the traditional way. And then of course you can copyright all the work, but it will cost you more.
Yeah.
So I think when you frame it like that, I think most people basically say, okay, let's go.
Yeah, let's go.
Money kind of flows.
Well, I love how on Twitter, you share these images and really inspire people to comment with their own variations, and you put the prompt that you use and the alt text. So I'm curious how you kind of think about generative AI art as like a creativity tool. Like, how do you use things like Midjourney to spark ideas? Because it seems like you're an endless well of application, and doing things like fake Eurovision singers that I would never think of. Yeah, maybe talk about how AI can help creativity.
I think in general, like, something like text to image is extremely powerful, because like I am not really good at drawing, or I'm not really good at like sitting in a 3D tool for like hours and create outputs. Like I get bored easily. I really like to see results fast. So for me, I can get inspired by basically anything. So the Eurovision stuff I did was, I was watching the Eurovision, like I was trying in real time, like with each of the people that were doing their thing, I was trying to make an AI version of it, just looking at what the Eurovision thing, trying to describe that with words, and then trying to generate that on the fly. I think this is what's interesting with Midjourney, for example, or even Stable Diffusion, is that it's so fast. Like if you have an idea, you can put it into words, then you can generate it, and it will take a few seconds, right? Like 15, 16 seconds tops, and you have 4 images from your text prompt. And then you can iterate, and you can be like, oh, I didn't like that, I'll try something else. So I think there's so many exercises that one could do just looking around, like trying to recreate objects in your room, or trying to recreate objects in your office. Or if you have a crazy idea you want to do, you can just go to ChatGPT and ask for crazy things, and then you can try to do those in Midjourney, for example. So I think there's no end to what's possible. And I think in terms of AI art or AI creatives, I think sharing here is what's important. I see a lot of the community kind of gatekeeping a lot of the work, and I can understand from an artist perspective that like, oh, you're creating stuff that's like you spent hours and hours on, and you want to put that out in the world. You necessarily don't want to tell everyone how you did it. That's your kind of secret sauce. But then for the rest of us, I think we need to educate a lot of people on how to use these tools, not just creators, like in general. Like a lot of people need to learn how to use these tools. And if we're gatekeeping, the time rift between the people that knows how to leverage these tools and the people that don't, that's just going to grow larger. And once it grows larger, the compounding effect of that time rift will make it so that the people that are ahead of the wave, they're just going to be constantly ahead of the wave, and people are not going to be able to catch up. So I think it's important to share. I think that's why I've been sharing a lot all this time, to get people stoked and excited, and like, don't be afraid of these tools, because like, they are tools, they're not sentient beings, right? So, and people are scared of new things in general. And if they don't know how to use something, then they're even more scared. And if they use something and they don't get the results that they are expecting, they might just brush it off as being bad. So I'm trying to kind of like share stuff as I learn things to make sure people have a good first experience. So that's why I share how I got to a result, for example. But I also share like my process of discovery and like my process of failure, and that it's not always working out the way I want. So that kind of put a human touch on like, it's not perfect. This is not a perfect tool. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that sharing idea. And it reminds me a lot of I always tell people the 5-minute method of like, first try it and then apply it to something in your life or work, and then share. I say amplify it, because if you can teach somebody, or if you can explain what you did, then you're starting to understand it. And I think inspiration is so key here with the AI tools. Well, you've done a number of classes teaching people and getting them not only stoked, but also to start using it professionally. So we're going to do a webinar on June 13th and then host a course on June 27th, all about creating that creative AI workflow. So I'm curious, what are some of the things that really jump out to people when they take a course from you? Like, what are the kind of big aha moments? They've probably tried some of these tools, maybe they're even using them, but what are the pieces that really are surprising for them?
Good question. I think the first thing is how fast it is. Like, they look at their traditional workflows and they go like, wow, this takes weeks. This takes multiple weeks, and there's so many people involved. And then they look at like an AI tool, even if it's not like 100% on par with like how their workflow would be currently. Like, maybe the quality level is not 100%. Maybe the quality gets to 90 or 95%. The time, however, is like on the opposite scale. So it's like 5 to 10% of the time to get to 90, 95% of the output. So people are like, at that point, they're like, actually, I'm willing to sacrifice that last 5% of quality in this part of the process, in this early part of the process, to kind of cut time, or to open up the room for more serendipity, like more happy accidents. Like a lot of creative work is like, you want to kind of like make so that you have as many points of serendipity as possible, so many points of like potential serendipity as possible. And if you are stuck doing grunt work and you only have the opportunity to kind of explore 2 routes, for example, 2 creative directions, then you're locked into the paradigm of only being able to have like 2 serendipitous moments, like, or maybe there's some cross between those 2 things and you might end up with a third option. Whereas like, if you're using AI and you're like, we can just speed up, we can spend the same time, but we could do 20 iterations, or we can do 10 iterations, and we might, hit something that we wouldn't hit otherwise. And then I think when people see that, and they go, wow, and I'm not locked into like having to do this at the beginning or the end of my entire workflow. I can do it anywhere in the workflow. And anyone basically at the company that can like put things into Word are being able to be part of this. It doesn't have to be, like a visual arts artist, or it doesn't have to be like the art director or the creative director that does all of this work. Like, anyone can contribute. And that's kind of both maybe a curse and a blessing, but it just opens up like the way of working. It makes it more democratized. It might sound buzzwordy, but like, in an agency or in any creative line of work, like, it is gatekeeped today, because like, it's only the people that knows how to use a certain tool, or that knows how to do a certain thing, that are having a say at the table, or everyone else is just like, noise. They're basically not adding any value to the conversation or to the work. But with AI here, it's like, well, actually, and people are more equal. Maybe someone that doesn't know how to do X, Y, and Z actually now can contribute valuable insights or valuable ideas, because they have ideas. Most people do have ideas, right? So you can imagine that if you are a creative person or a designer using these tools, and you're by definition already are very creative, you're just going to be very, very supercharged by this. Like you're going to be able to do way, way more. I think that's something that you can clearly see on my Twitter, for example. Like before I discovered like generative AI, I was tweeting a little bit here, a little bit there, a lot about design because I've been in the design industry for 15 plus years. But then like with generative AI, I just like all of a sudden I was tweeting 10 times as much and people were interacting, 100 times more, not just because of the novelty, but because like they're actually interesting ideas and there's good use cases for how you can use this stuff to actually solve real world problems. Otherwise, if this wasn't the case, people would not be interested.
Yeah.
They just brush it off and go like, well, that's just novelty. And then here we go. I mean, I'm plus 6 months into this and it's more obvious than ever than that this is going to change like industries, not just the creative industry. This will change everything.
I love that idea of like increasing contribution, like when people are like, make the logo bigger, right? Or make it green or make it red. It's like, no, you can, right? Like go try it, like go play with it. And in a way, it actually, I think it could increase the value of a designer, which really is just someone who has an eye for design, because they can kind of keep going until they get to the point that they feel really good about it. Where the rest of us, are maybe like, what if it was like this? And we try it and we realize that looks horrible, right? Like learning the right questions and the right way to direct things will become, I think, really valuable.
Exactly. I wonder about, knowing how to direct things this is a very interesting point. And I think this is where designers, today designers are doing a lot of things and maybe grunt work is a lot of it. But I think any designer in the future will do more directing, and not just directing like AI, but directing fellow work, like people that they work with. Because like knowing what you want and knowing how you want things to be, that's part of design. That's part of like designing things. And like you said, like instead of that work now ending up on the designer, can we try this? Can we do that? That's just tedious work for design. No designer likes to do that. Very few does. But if the people that like the stakeholders themselves can go in and like try these things out and realize for themselves that this actually looks shit, or even if they don't, they can present that as an idea to the designer and the designer can tell them, hey, this is okay, but this doesn't work in this condition, or it doesn't go well with all these other assets that we're having. And then all of a sudden, everyone can agree and go like, well, the designer probably knows better than the product manager or the salesperson in the end, right? Everyone is good at their own job, but it really opens up for more collaboration. It's almost like the network effect, right? Like the larger a network is, the more points in the network, the stronger it becomes and the more value is derived, etc. So I think we can see the same thing here with AI. Is like, it's just empowering more people to contribute, whether or not it's in the creative industry. And I think that's going to be powerful. We're creating more nodes, essentially, that can collaborate.
Yeah, it's like design's moving from the fingers to the mind, right? And you're now a CEO designer, where you are, you're setting the vision of this piece or this, campaign, and then setting out the entire team to like go explore every possible angle, and we'll come back and then we'll launch. It's really exciting. And I wonder about with learning, we think a lot about education on Ed3, and you have 2 kids. Like, how do you think about teaching or inspiring this work, both for professionals, but even at a young age? Like, what are the frameworks you kind of bring in? I know you've talked about dynamic prompting, maybe other things that you think are important.
Yeah, everything is changing so fast. But I think if we look now, short term, knowing how to speak AI or like knowing how to communicate well with AI, I think it's important. I wouldn't say like prompt engineering is going to be, I've said this both with good intents and bad intents. I guess like prompt engineering could be a thing of the future, but I don't see it being a skill that's going to be massively important because the models or the AI is going to be better. So if you're just good at communication, like generally good at communication, speaking natural language, then you're going to be able to converse well with AI. Currently, prompt engineering is kind of a mix between using specific language or using specific tokens in combination with natural language to get what you want. But I think this will kind of simmer out to become just natural language spoken well with a machine. So communication has always been important for any line of work, but I think with AI, it's going to be even more important, and it's going to help people not just communicating with computers, but communicating with each other. So if anything, at this point, I would argue that teaching communication, teaching like well-written or spoken communication is probably the most important thing that we can do, but also in the context of like, how do we talk to machines? and how do machines talk back to us. And this is kind of the realm where we're going one-on-one with a machine or multiple machines, but there's this kind of like thing brewing currently where you deploy agents essentially. So like a kind of semi-sentient version of these things where you give them objectives and missions and then go autonomously out to kind of work on your behalf or work for you. So it could be that like relatively soon, instead of us prompting an image for an image for an image, we might give like a creative brief to an AI or to 10 AIs or to 1,000 AIs, and they all work alongside each other. And then as a designer, it's our work to kind of like curate and give feedback and improve, and then take that work and put a human twist on it, or like do the final mile, the last mile on that work. And that could happen really fast. It could also take years. But something tells me that with the current rate of change here, we're not talking multiple years. Things are happening fast. That's why it's important to learn these things now and not in 3 years' time.
Really, it ties back into your project of bedtime story AI. You're teaching your kids language by creating stories with AI, so they have the language to then use AI in the future.
So meta.
So meta. Well, Linus, it's so great to hang out and chat. Definitely follow Linus on Twitter. It's just his full name, Linus Ekenstam. And his course is coming up. We're hosting it here at 5min.ai. And you can sign up by going to youraiworkflow.com. And that's both for the free webinar on June 20th, as well as the paid course on June 27th. And he's going to dive deep and really create the workflow for you that you need to go from AI curious to AI professional. So we are so thankful that you shared a little bit more with us, Linus. We can't wait to see you in the webinar. And until then, have a wonderful week.
Yeah, thank you so much. Looking forward to see you.